Friends, in the postgraduate program in Visual Arts, under the title of Philosophy and Aesthetics, we are going to discuss feminist aesthetics today. I am Deepak Kannal from Faculty of Fine Arts, MS University of Baroda. Feminist aesthetics identifies a set of perspectives and questions the existing discourse that has been laid down in subject of philosophical theories and assumptions regarding art and aesthetics. Feminist scholarship begins with the thesis that the gender is more than a biological fact. Gender, it is held, is embedded in language, thought and culture. It is also believed that historically masculine bias is equally embedded, and that the disclosure of that bias reveals gaps in our understanding. Feminist aesthetics tends to unravel the hidden patriarchal or gender-based tendencies of more seemingly neutral treatment of the arts. It deals with ways that gender influences the formation of ideas about art, artists and aesthetic values. Examples of aesthetics discourse with gendered underpinning are seen throughout history. For example, Enlightenment aesthetics, which firmly established the foundation of most aesthetics perspectives to the modern day, is perceived to be full of gendered notions of beauty. This period in the theory of beauty looks back at the ideal of Greco-Roman beauty and identifies with the similar principles to judge not only beauty but the ever-present dichotomy of male versus female beauty. The notion of woman as beautiful and a certain type of women as beautiful has been the burdensome yoke of feminist theories. This inclination is evident in Enlightenment thought from Hogarth's in Analysis of Beauty, where he says flowing, gliding outlines which are in waves, giving not only a grace to the part but to the whole body. To Kant, observation of the feeling of beautiful and the sublime, where he says the fair sex has just as much understanding as the male, but it is a beautiful understanding, whereas ours should be a deep understanding, an expression which signifies identity with the sublime. But women's philosophy is not to reason but to sense. Most of history and aesthetics discourse is variegated and marked with this gendered bias, creating the underlying binaries that eventually feminist aesthetics confronts. The binaries of the following traits divide under the division of masculine versus feminine. Now, see this table below. When we are talking about masculine, it is sublime. If it is feminine, it's beauty. On one hand, we talk about the artist. For the feminine, it is the artwork. Masculine is the creator. Feminine is the created or creation. Masculine is the mind. The feminine is the body. The masculine is intellect. The feminine is emotions and sex. Here is one of such excerpts from Griselda Pollock's essay to understand the feminist readings of a work of art. In the painting and his model, which was painted by Henri Matisse in 1970, represents an artist at work in the privileged space of modern art, the studio. Now, the documentary image of Matisse's actual working space on the Quai Saint-Michel in Paris, it symbolically represents the ideological conditions in which modern art was created by the painter in the studio. The painter Matisse is a man, as is the painter he represents. More often, the man or the artist is clothed, while the model, prototypically a woman, is naked and often supine in some gracelessly uncomfortable position. Matisse's reversal juxtaposes Caucasian, flesh-colored and possibly nude artist to the crumpled mess of faceless costumes in the armchair in the corner, his female model. Masculine nudity associated with Apollonian intelligence and creativity signifies a mastering and active body, and strip the artist of any specific social or historical signs other than the white masculinity which he is clothed because he is an artist. The body is not anatomically sexed. Cultural connections provide the gender through the assimilation of the term artist to the man. See the paint. The writer is clearly trying to underline the portrayal of male dominance and superiority, not only in the attitude and the gendered nomenclature of the man alone as the artist, but also the visual manifestation of such presumptions. Such presumptions of man as the creator, man as genius, and man as the artist, and the woman as the docile creation is model. And the female body as mostly eroticized, although it may not be the case in this work, it is usually the norm. There is a power play that the viewer has become so used to that such discourse seem to bring that viewer out of his or her days to the realization that all visual and literary communication strengthens the already existing notions of superiority that exist in the modern art, modern man and the artist. Feminist perspectives in aesthetics are also attuned to the cultural influences that exert power over subjectivity and identity. These perspectives uncover the underlying social structures that lead to our views on race, society and gender. Much as what Marxist theory does for the economic hierarchy and the class struggle. The incorporation of feminist theory in the study of art and aesthetics was quite natural, as aesthetics itself is an interdisciplinary subject. Even the viewer of the art is subject to scrutiny here in feminist theory. The idea of an audience perspective that can be generalized on the basis of a single human nature is challenged by the hypothesis of a necessarily biased gendered consciousness and perception. The gaze of an audience must take a form that includes the gender. The insistence on the reality of gender is usually coupled with a claim that the male gaze is inherently repressive. The introduction of the term the male gaze can be traced back to Laura Mulvey and her essay Visual Pleasure and Narrative Cinema, which was published in 1975. In it, Mulvey states that in films, women are typically the objects rather than the possessors of gaze, because the control of the camera and thus the gaze comes from the factors such as the assumption of the heterosexual men as the default target audience for most films are. While this was more true in the time it was written, Hollywood protagonists were mostly male. The base concept of men as watchers and the women as watchers will still applies today in all forms of art and life itself, despite the growing number of movies targeted towards women and that feature female protagonists. Though it was introduced as part of film theory, the term can and is often applied to other kinds of media and art. Most research and elaboration on elements of gaze in feminist aesthetics happened during the time of pop art and cinema in 60s and 70s and continued thereon. Feminist aesthetics arose substantially in the 1970s from a combination of political activism in the art world. Of course, feminist theory would not happen without feminism, the political and social movement for equal rights for women. Modern Western feminist history is split into three time periods, or we can call them waves, each with a slightly different aims based on prior progress. First wave feminism of the 19th and early 20th century focused on overturning legal inequalities, particularly women's suffrage. Second wave of feminism, which can be dated to 1960s to 80s, broadened debate to include cultural equalities and gender norms and the role of women in society. Third wave of feminism The recent one, which starts from 1990 to 2000, refers to the diverse strains of feminist activities seen as both a continuation of the second wave and a response to its perceived failure. They have developed in conjunction with the postmodern debates about culture and society that have taken place in many fields in the social science and humanities. All of these new ideas question the norms and the philosophical legacy of the Western world and try to look at them in the new light, to look at the biases that have come into these earlier theories. Linda Nochlin, one of the very first feminist historians, had the notion of the male artist genius in mind in 1977, when she asked her famous question, why have there been no great women artists? For much of the modern period, the very best example of fine arts were understood to be creative products of artists with special talent amounting to genius. And genius is a trait that possesses especially emphatic gender meaning. She presented a historical research on how women were secluded to private spaces and they were being taught art not only by their male colleagues or fathers, leading to a masculine perspective and domination in art practices. These historical explanations illuminate another pair of opposites marked by the gender, public and private. This binary has been especially investigated by feminist political theories, but also had considerable significance for philosophy of art. To these theories, fine arts was always an exclusionary practice. Mindful of the effects those strict divisions between fine arts and craft have been exerted over female creativity, feminist artists started giving importance to the so-called craft practices as art and paid attention to the role of creativity in domestic life. Perspective on the domestic and the daily lives of women have dramatically influenced not only the material of art but also subject portrait. Feminist and post-feminist art has been groundbreaking in the theoretical exploration of the body in its varieties and meanings, including sexuality and maternity. The turn of attention to the sensations of the body as well as the domestic environments has contributed to an area of interest loosely labeled as everyday aesthetics. Scholarship on everyday aesthetics includes examination of craft practices, which are often pursued in the home where many women continue to work, and to artistic traditions that do not feature a distinction between fine arts and craft, such as the cultural traditions of Asia, cooking, eating, arranging furniture and other items, gardening. All these quotidian activities have aesthetic features. They are not always uplifting or even pleasant, but attention to their sensuous character, the rhythm they impose on the day, week or year, and their place in the patterns of life disperses aesthetic attention to regions that are relatively new to the theory, if we are widely familiar in experience. Many other scholars brought to light that the other great women artists and creative women of other fields, as well as by reevaluating the contribution of women in the art and literature. Rediscovery of the work of women of the past was one of the major efforts of feminist scholars during so-called second wave of feminism in the 70s and the 80s. A period that also saw the founding of the Women's Studies program at many colleges and universities in North America and Europe. Especially in the early years of such studies, an important goal of scholarship was to give women a fair shot of recognition in order to attain the goal of sexual equality in the arts. Feminist analysis both contribute to the development of this field of interest and occupy a place within it. For example, there is a growing body of philosophy that explores issues about food and eating, which are topics that hitherto had little to no position in the field of thought. This new subject has several sources of development, including feminism. For it can be considered an area of scholarship that has been nurtured by the overall critical questioning of the dominant conceptual framework in philosophy, including those that overlook matters relevant to the practical and physical realities of the living. The discussion over feminist art and what it should represent form the gynocentric tradition, meaning that the works of women artists always manifest certain feminine aesthetic qualities because their makers are females. But other feminists respond negatively, arguing that other social positions, that is historical, national, ethnic, racial, sexual orientation and so forth, impose too many differences on women to yield any femininity to their work. On the other hand, some scholars argue that women artists and writers often produce a counter voice within their established traditions, which might be considered to claim its own aesthetics. All these fields of feminist disclosure have yielded much text and research, all beneficial to a student of feminist aesthetics. Feminist aesthetics is not just theoretical premise, but a more dynamic, evolving cultural practice that changes with time and also acts in a proactive manner as creator of culture. Therefore, feminist aesthetics contains a component which theories of interpretations are directed to particular works of culture. Feminist interpretations are sometimes informed by Marxism and its varieties. Psychoanalytic theories have been widely appropriated in critical theory. Adaptation of psychoanalytic theory have an especially large presence in the interpretation of performance, literature, film and visual art. Some feminists employ the discourse of Jacques Lacan, whose concept of the symbolic order has been widely applied to understand the power of patriarchy embedded in cultural forms of every kind. Lacan divided the creation of consciousness or the individuated state of a child into certain stages of divides. The imaginary is the state in which there is no clear distinction between the subject and the object, or the child psyche and the everything outside of it. The symbolic, where the child becomes aware of the binaries like male and female, or father and mother. This particular period has been important for feminist theory as we see from another except of Griselda Pollock. In this part of the essay, she states that the abstract expressionist movement of modern art was no different in its gender assumptions, as Matisse is portrayed as the active male or painter figure indicating his masculinity. So does Jackson Pollock with his action of painting. Use the passive supine canvas as the female figure in a way. She then compares a photo of Jackson Pollock with a photo of Helen Frankensteller. Using Lacan, she goes on to say, the subject encountered through the traces of his action upon the canvas is a self imagined to be capable of total self-expression, free from division and articulation, producing meanings without the mediation of symbol or sign. At a psychic level, this must be read as a regressive fantasy to a moment when the photo subject first imagines itself unified. It invents an imagined memory of being able to communicate spontaneously and fully by means of the infant's primitive but psychically rated tool, the look and the gesture. For this reason, the fantasy exerts a powerful appeal to all artists, irrespective of their sex. It evokes the imaginary phase, a woman in the process of being made a human subject, which is common to us all. Despite the fact that the inflection of culturally ordained sexual differences are already shaping different trajectories which will match our forming subjectivities to the position of masculinity and femininity. But for all that, this ideology of art services bourgeois mythologies of the self-possessing and self-realizing individual in the imaginary form. We must recognize that the function is also decisively on the side of the symbolic, that is the cultural, social and political order. The imaginary individual, as all the images so starkly insist in, through iconography, is a man powered by the privileged place on the symbolic side of the division, theorized as sexual difference. Griselda Pollock is talking about the connection between the abstract expressionism and Lacan's imaginary place. The actually non-representative kind of abstract art in the artist urged to go back to the moment of his childhood psyche, where he could express himself or herself only through gestures, and even though his place is mostly genderless, the portrayal of the expressionist artist has always been male. She then goes on to refute the possibility of a self-expressing artist without socio-cultural inflections. The psychoanalytical adaptation of Julia Kristeva, who analyzes the artistic experience of abjection as a threat to self-arising from both the allure and the horror of self-disintegration and reabsorption into the body of the mother, is especially suggestive for the understanding of the aesthetic arousal of disgust and the strong sexual and gendered element of horror. Far from a mere application of a theory to aesthetics, the feminist uses an abjection have explored and enlarged the concept in order to understand not only the psychological development of individuals but also the construction of social and political relations. The uses of psychoanalytic theory in aesthetic art as an area of controversy, as many philosophers reject the assumptions required by these approaches as empirically baseless. They argue that empirical, particularist analysis of individual works have more explanatory power to illuminate the positions that gender manifests in art. Thus, differences over interpretative theories represent divisions both within philosophy itself and in the transdisciplinary scholarship. Debates over appropriate tools to understand the meaning of art and the power of culture should lay to rest once for all any idea that feminist aesthetics describes a unitary set of ideas. In fact, it is a multidisciplinary discourse that is still going and being understood as well as also misunderstood.